Good afternoon. I hope everybody had a good lunch. If you want to have a nap, you should sit behind someone, and then I don't see you, so you're all right. The problem is you're all sitting so spread out. I'm going to see if you take a nap, so. No, it's all right. So my talk is called Make It Fixable. And the reason why I chose that title is that very often you think of that you have to make all your applications and all your systems, they have to be secure for some kind of value of secure. And I am claiming that's not possible. Because some of the things that you are protecting yourself from are things that you cannot possibly know in advance. A good example from the last few weeks, of course, is the meltdown Spectre thing. Nobody could imagine that. There's no way that you could have known. And so the idea of this entire presentation is more to set you up so that you can handle it when something goes wrong and try to eliminate a certain amount of risk, but you still have to be able to live with risk. So who am I? My name is Patricia Aas. I'm a programmer. I've been working as a C++ programmer for about 12 years. And I graduated from the University of Oslo in 2005. And then I went to work on the Opera browser, which I hope people used. So I worked on the original Opera browser, now called Opera Classic, because that's what they call it when they discontinue stuff. And then one of the original Opera founders, he went off to start another browser company just a few years ago, which is called Vivaldi, and that's where I work now. But in between, I worked at Cisco for 5 years, and I also was a Java consultant for 2 years, but it didn't stick. So first of all, security is a very difficult topic. It spans so many things. And so just if you're going to go into the space and if you're going to try to make your applications, your systems, what you produce safer, you have to be kind with yourself. Because it is quite a difficult space. We're used to getting bad feedback, but this is like the ultimate bad feedback, right? So the absolute first step that you have to have some way to people to contact you if there is a problem with your application or your systems. And this is surprisingly a problem that is very common that people don't have. So if you have a security researcher, just a random person that finds something and they're not able to contact you, they will probably be nice and try to contact you in several different ways. And if they're not able to, then they'll tweet it. So what you want is some way for them to contact you, but you also have to understand that this relationship is a symbiotic relationship. And they are doing you a favor. They've done a certain amount of work on your behalf for free. If you're not in a bug bounty kind of situation, they've done a certain amount of work for free. And you have to respect that work, and doing that is the specific type of relationship. And most importantly, I think there is to maintain that relationship is transparency and being nice. So basically just like somebody reports something to you, just say thank you. Thank you for reporting this to us. We will follow it up. We'll give you some feedback in a day or something, and then you'll tell them about the timeline. And then as long as you keep people in the loop, people are generally very happy. So another thing that people can get kind of annoyed about is that everybody is an expert. Everybody has an opinion. But the fact is, and I think at least, that there are many experts in different kinds of areas, and people that you don't think of as being security people in your company actually end up having a lot of influence on security in your company. So this is the outline of my talk. I'm going to do the first 5, and then I'm going to do a little summary of the first 5, and then I'm going to do 6, because I think it's a separate thing. So the first 5 are different kinds of problems that you might have in your project in different ways, and how you can try to counteract them. Mostly because you want to be in a situation where when you get a vulnerability report, you can respond to it quickly. And generally, that is often where you end up having trouble. So the first one is the most important one. Actually, it should clarify a little bit. What is a system? I talk a lot about a system or an application or something, but basically you'll see throughout my talk in the examples that a system could be anything, and your user could be anybody. It could be an internal user, it could be an external user, it could be an external system. And it doesn't have to be an application. It could be a sysadmin. You're managing systems inside of your company. So, and a vulnerability doesn't really have to be a vulnerability. It could also be a mistake. Somebody makes a mistake and your website goes down. that is just as big of a catastrophe as if you were hacked, right? Yeah. So the first one is the most important one, and it is a very common one, especially if you're in charge of some kind of legacy system. And very often you will find this in the public sector, where they have some kind of magic box somewhere, which is in charge of something that was written in COBOL in the 80s. Nobody knows how it works, and you don't even have a COBOL programmer anymore. So if somebody reports something there, you're in big trouble, because you think it's some kind of really old version of Solaris running there too. And this is a problem. Because you can end up in this even with brand new software. If you are shipping some kind of Internet of Things device and you're relying on the user to actually plug in your thing and update it manually, they won't. All experience has shown us that user-initiated updates only go for like 5% if you're lucky. And it depends really on your space. If it is some kind of hardware device, you can practically go for 0. So there are many different ways that you can end up in a problem here, but most likely, if you're in charge of some kind of legacy system, it is the fact that you can't even build this application. So if you have to fix a bug in it, and then you don't even have a build environment for it. So if you're going to start protecting yourself from this kind of thing, it's basically to see what kind of systems you have, and then try to set up some kind of way of getting the source code, getting a way to build it, getting a build environment, so that when you get a report, you can actually fix it. Because worst case, you'll end up with, you have a binary blob, and you have to do like a binary patch. Cross your fingers and hope you don't have another one. So there's solutions here. But we can give like other types of examples, like the Internet of Things. You have lots of, and this I think is sort of like the history of embedded, right? We were in the beginning of the embedded things, they were not connected to the internet. But so you had a tradition of you shipping a device and you're giving it to somebody, and the relationship is over. They have it, you don't have it anymore. And then we connected this thing to the internet, and then suddenly the whole thing broke down, because now suddenly people can connect to this thing, and you end up having broadcasting sound from your children's bedroom, right? You have another issue, and this is like not even a legacy thing, but if you bought a product at some point, and then the company you bought it from, they went out of business, and now suddenly there's a known vulnerability in this product that you have, and there's no maintenance on it. So how are you going to deal with that? All of these become, the reason this becomes your problem the moment you depend on something, and then you have to figure out how you want to deal with it. So if it is something that you can get the code for, then just set up a normal build development environment, put it in a Docker image somewhere, make sure that you can build it. Try and make sure that what you have is something you built yourself. And that is a big problem. You have something that you don't really know how it's built, and now you're trying to build it yourself. But at least if you manage to make something that is functionally the same, at least now you know what you're shipping. Now you know what's running. And you know that you can fix it. But all the rest of the stuff is like normal development practices that you would have in any kind of active development project. Problem is that this thing was never in your active development. It's just something that's running somewhere. So the fix for this is you have to ship it somehow. So you have to get the fix. If you manage to fix the vulnerability, you have to ship the fix to your user. The problem is the user could be far away. The user could be on the other side of the world, and you have no contact with them. So how are you going to get your fix from inside of your office to their toy in somebody's bedroom in Brazil? And if you haven't set this up beforehand, it's going to be very, very hard to be able to ship this. And you've seen this in the automotive industry. They have this problem. Like if they have a bug in the car, then they generally have to take all the cars back. It's very expensive. And now you have over-the-air updates of cars, because cars are ruling laptops these days. But you basically want something like that. You want to be built-in auto-update from the beginning, so that you have a deployment channel to all of these things that you are in charge of, right? And if it is shelfware, I would say if you can, then choose some kind of open source solution, because if you do, then you know you can fix it later. The problem is if you choose another supplier, a professional supplier, and they go out of business, you're in the same problem again. And the second one is a very common problem. I think everybody can relate to it. It is no control over dependencies. And this is a big ball of mud. But basically, this is the framework avalanche, right? This explosion, where you end up depending on stuff you don't even know what you're depending on, because the transitive dependencies are so massive that you're basically pulling in like all of NPM, or you really don't have control anymore. And the thing is, it's not really your fault, because it's kind of set up that way. The whole industry is set up that way. But the problem is now suddenly you can have things that you're pulling in that is causing risk to your project. So there are many ways that this can bite you in many different ways, like I talked about frameworks, but you can have things like the operating systems on the machines in your company, but you can also have the operating system version that your customer is running. So let's say that you're shipping an app for Android, and your Android has a huge portion of Android phones in the world are on outdated Android versions that have known vulnerabilities in them. So you now suddenly, this is like, it's not even your phone, and suddenly now it's your problem. Because if your application can be exploited through libraries inside of somebody's phone in Malaysia, then suddenly that is your problem. So there are many, many different ways, and I'll give a couple of examples. These are, some of them are a little bit like a year or two ago, but I think they are all examples of stuff you couldn't imagine beforehand. And there was, in stage fright, there were bugs in the multimedia library on Android. It was basically the parsing of media files. So, and you would, of course, use the media library on Android to do media in your app. You would do that. That's what you do. You don't ship your own media library. You use the one that's there. And especially because it has hardware acceleration and all sorts of things, and so you would use it. You would use OpenSSL on the operating system of all your things, and you wouldn't think about it, and now suddenly this is your problem. And then, of course, the very famous left pad incident. And for those of you who don't know about the very famous left pad incident, this is the epitome of the JavaScript framework explosion, right? You end up pulling in this like micro library that's supposed to like pre-pen some spaces. It's like, I don't know, 10 lines of JavaScript. And some guy gets pissed off and he pulls it out of NPM and he breaks 10 to 20% of the internet. And this was not on anybody's list of things that we're afraid of. So how are you going to deal with this dependency problem? And basically it's trying to get an overview, at least. Trying to get an overview, what are your dependencies? What are the versions? Do you need them? Are these upstreams dependable? Like you've had problems now where, for example, people have extensions in their browser, and then somebody buys their extension, and they have a massive install base, and now they're using it as a deployment channel for deploying malware or Bitcoin miners to your users. It's like, this is not something that somebody installed your extension ever thought about, right? And these things are difficult. So this is basically just plain kind of software auditing and trying to get an overview, but you won't eliminate all your risk. But you will be aware of a lot of it. And that's what it is. If somebody reports there is a vulnerability in a certain version of a library, you know what version you're on. And you know maybe, okay, if I adjust the version on this, then I have to adjust all of these as well. And you know that's going to take 3 weeks because you've done it before. So how did people deal with these that we talked about earlier? With stage fright and also to a certain extent heartbleed, if it was on a system that could not be updated, let's say an old Android phone, apps started working around it. Because basically most of these are, at least especially stage fright, if you could sanitize the input before you sent it into the library, then you could protect yourself from the vulnerability. So that's what some did, like the Firefox browser did. With Heartbleed, mostly everybody was pushing everybody to update and patch, but there's lots of systems that are still running with Heartbleed. And with LeftPad, it's, yeah, people just stopped depending on LeftPad. But it didn't really stop them. It's like LeftPad was only an example, right? But everybody felt that LeftPad was a little bit too embarrassing. Okay, the team is gone. It's also a very common problem, but it's also a common problem in many different ways. Very often you will have companies where they're not primarily a software company, so they will have like a department that does something, and then they have a project and they hire in a bunch of consultants to do these things. And then at a certain point, the project is over because people who don't work in IT actually believe that things can be over, and then they send everybody home. And now there's a vulnerability in this thing, and nobody in your company has even seen the code, and they open it up, and it's like, how do you even deal with this? But it could also be that, they were fired. They were downsized, these people. And the problem is that people don't realize, especially in management, often don't realize that a lot of the knowledge about your system is in people's heads. And when those people disappear, large portions of the knowledge inside of your company also disappears. But you could also have that you had it outsourced all along, right? Somebody else did it. And then at a certain point you had to take it in, or they delivered it to you. But still, you have no knowledge of it. And then you have this bus factor, which I think almost every project has at least one or two of those indispensable people that are like, when they go on vacation, everybody's like, nobody moves. Nobody knows how to build this thing. And those people are, the good thing about them is the people who do this are generally, they don't leave. Because they're set. They'll never get downsized. Like, no matter what happens, this is job security. You are indispensable. But the thing is, they might get hot, they might get sick, they might go on like a sabbatical, or they might something. And this is a risk that you have if a lot of the major part of the knowledge in your company is in somebody's head. So, in the public sector, you will often see that people try to take it back, try to take it on again, because I think people are realizing more and more that IT is not a department, IT is our business. It is the core of our business, no matter what your business is. And we're also seeing that more in the public sector also. They're realizing that actually computer systems is public sector, instead of it being just a department. But it's a growing process. With abandoned frameworks, yeah, you have lots of the interdependency stuff. You can't upgrade something because then you have to upgrade something else, and you can't upgrade that. And then you're sitting on an old version. You try to patch the one that you have, which is basically a fork. And then this can lead you into a very strange place. And this is the fix. You have to own it. You have to actually take it on. I know it was somebody else's problem, and I know you didn't like them. Because that's the thing. You generally feel like somebody dropped a big ball of mud on you, right? Now you have this big problem, and you didn't even make this problem, and it doesn't feel fair. But to move on, this is a psychological process. You kind of have to come to this stage. You have to accept it. You have to accept that this problem is now yours. And you have to take it on and own it, and figure out what do I need to change for me to feel responsible for this thing? What do I need to change for me to take it into my house? Yeah. In the public sector, you saw a lot of backsourcing, and for abandoned frameworks, you can try to replace with an equivalent or remove the dependencies and things like that. But one of the things that I think is very important is that if you want to really experience the end user's situation, because very often you will see that people complain that the user did something stupid. And I don't like that, because your users should be your friends. It should be a family. You should care about them. But very often you don't really understand their situation unless you use the systems, unless you use the application yourself. And so I think that is a goal in itself, to try to be a user of anything that you make so that you have the user experience. So, and this is the one that everybody's afraid of, and this is the one that I think is the easiest. There is some kind of vulnerability in your code. And the reason why it's easier, and these are many different ways that can happen, but the reason why it's easier is because if you have a development project and you have the code and you're working on the code, then basically you have a build environment, you have configuration. You're handling your configuration, you're handling your builds, you're handling your version control. You have your developers, they know the code. You have generally a deployment channel. You might even have auto update. I mean, you are set for pushing this fix. This is like, this should be, you find it, you fix it, you push it, and you're done. It's fabulous. But even though, and this is an example from Norway, Rema 1000, which is it's a chain of grocery stores in Norway. It's the biggest one, and we're not really good at diversifying this grocery store. So we have like 3 chains, and they're exactly the same. But this is one of the biggest ones, and they had made an app for their customers, and they'd only had it in Play Store for like 2 months. And then the thing is, it was very popular because it's a very popular chain of grocery stores. And so they ended up having quickly, throughout those 2 months, maybe 15% of the Norwegian population had downloaded and installed this app. That's quite, it's very successful, really. And of course, then somebody had to have a look, right? And this Halvard Nygaard, he realized that he could retrieve all sorts of grocery shopping information about anybody using credentials that were hard-coded in the app. And then he tried to report this. And this is back to being able to handle the reports coming in. If you are not prepared, if your organization is not prepared, then what happened to him is going to happen with you. Because basically, this was handled by PR and marketing. And PR and marketing, they have one job. They should defend the brand, right? So he's coming here with this like super negative exploding thing, and they totally went after him. They managed to say both at the same time that they were not hacked and that he hacked them. I'm not really sure how that actually worked. And then they said they would report him to the police. And of course, that was the absolute worst. They exploded in all of the newspapers, right? Because basically what you're showing in that kind of situation is that you don't have control. That's what everybody thinks. It's like you have all of this personal information, but you don't have any control, and you don't care about security, and I can't trust you. And basically you went from defending the brand to actually just destroying the brand. And the thing is, this was the best case scenario. This should have been perfect. All they had to do was say thank you. And they had all of the developers there. They were everybody. This was an active project. It was only an app. It was in Play Store. They could even push the change log to the end user so the user could see on their phone that it was fixed. I mean, this is set for success. But even then, if you don't realize that PR and marketing is also part of security in your organization, suddenly this can happen to you. I have another example, which turned out totally different, but was probably also horrible at the time. So you have the normal things, like you have to live it. This isn't something that you can't do security and then you're done. It's something that you kind of have to do all along. It's a part of your process. And that's also a thing that you can't make it secure. No, things will be out of your control, or you'll make mistakes. What you have to do is you have to set up something so that you can survive it if something bad happens. That you have a way of handling it, and you can handle it in a way that is professional. But as is true throughout the talk, is if you can't ship the fix, then it doesn't matter. There's no reason to fix something if you can't ship the fix to the end user. So that is always where you have to begin. And I'm going to take this as another example. And I found it really interesting because I saw it happening live on, I was following them on Twitter at the time. And it was an accident, right? There was a sysadmin, he was doing regular maintenance, and then suddenly he was in not the place he thought he was. And then there was an RM-RF star incident, and he basically deleted everything they had. And, people noticed. So suddenly everybody's like, well, what happened? What happened? Everything's gone. What happened? And they were like, but the thing is, they went out and they said they said we had a system and we were doing regular maintenance. There was an accident. We didn't add this. Right away. They just went out and said it. And then they went, but don't worry, we have backups. And then you saw in real time as backup number 1, backup number 2, backup number 3 failed. And they were live tweeting this thing. Can you imagine being the person sitting there doing this and having this massive failure being broadcast on internet live? I'm sure it was horrible. But the thing is, the thing that I really found fascinating about this thing is to a big section of their public, they gained trust in something that was basically a massive disaster. And the reason why they gained trust is because after this entire gruesome ordeal, and I'm sure some psychiatric treatment was necessary after this, all of their users knew 2 things about them. 1, they will never have a backup fail ever. They will test all of their backups. They will make sure this is going to be the most safe backup system ever invented, because they never want to do this again. It was horrifying. But secondly, they won't hide it from you. If something happens, they won't hide it from you. And we've seen cases in this year with Equifax, with many of these companies, where they have lost tons of sensitive information about people, and they just didn't tell anybody. And what you know about these people is, first, they're going to take their backups really seriously. But secondly, if something happens, even if it's horrifying, they will tell you. And this builds trust. And can you imagine having this absolute disaster and actually gaining trust? I talked to people who said that they've switched from GitHub to GitLab because of this incident. Can you imagine? This is the last of my challenges part, and it is, my boss made me do it. And I think we have to bring it up because it's something that we don't talk about a lot. What if what you're told to do is the bug? What if your boss tells you to do something that you know you shouldn't do? And it could be that you're creating a security issue for your user. It might be a privacy problem for your user, but it might be unethical, or it might be blatantly illegal, the thing that you have been told to do. And how are you going to handle it? I'm going to give an example. And this I also found very interesting at the time. It was a game, and they had a new version, and they had something they called an AntiCrack solution. I like when they have fancy names for stuff. And basically it was a driver. And they installed the driver and they used the system, and then they could sniff around and poke around and check and stuff. But basically this driver, what it did was that basically you could send it in a function pointer, and it would execute whatever you sent in with kernel privileges. It's very useful. And in the security business, they often call things in this class of things often a rootkit. The unfortunate thing is that when you first have this installed in the user system, then anybody can use it, right? It's not just the game. But the thing that fascinated me about this thing was that if you know how to write a driver, you know this is a bad idea. I cannot imagine that the person who did this was not perfectly understanding that this was really dumb and we should not do this. So what made me think was why didn't you say anything? And I think that is something that is much bigger than our teams. Because what I see, for example, in Norway, it's very, very difficult to fire somebody in Norway. Extremely difficult. It's such a big process, you generally try to make them quit. So what you see then, you build a culture where people are not afraid to be fired. And when people are not afraid to be fired, they're much more honest with you. So in Norway, you could have somebody who's 2 steps down, going up to his boss's boss and saying that this project is dumb and shouldn't be done, and getting away with it. That's the thing that you would do. But I would see when I was working in Cisco, which is a global company, and we had this huge team in the US, and then we had a team in Norway, and the cultures were so different. And I talked to some of these people in the US, and I was like, so what do you guys say when you, this thing is dumb? And they were like, No. Because they have maybe 1 day notice, maybe 2 weeks notice. They live in a country where very often they're the sole provider for their families. And they live in a country that has no universal health care. So you think somebody's going to risk their entire family's health care, their entire family's income or their home to help the company? No, they won't. They will shut up and they will say, yes, sir, I'll do that right away, sir. And then they'll be on LinkedIn trying to get another job. So the thing is, it's very difficult to fix those high-level stuff. Like, you can't make workers' rights be something in your country. It's very difficult to solve this problem as an individual. And so I talked to many people, and I realized that one solution that a lot of people have done and that worked in real life is find a powerful ally. And this is sort of, it's something that people do a lot, but it's sort of like you whisper to somebody at the coffee machine, something that you think they should do, and it's the CTO, and you know that it will end up in a meeting and then suddenly it gets done. It's sort of like that. So you have to figure out somebody high up in the organization that you can talk to, and they just kind of bring it up. And the thing is, what you're hoping is that this person will then say, oh, I think this is dumb, but they have the clout to pull it off, right? And then you, when the whole thing trickles down to your level again, you'll be like, oh, really? And then you get away with it. So you manage to actually stop something that you don't want to do without having to deal with the fallout of being difficult, right? And I have at the last resort, and I have to point out, I consider it to be last resort not because of the company, but because of you. And that is public whistleblowing. And the reason for that is it's really bad for your CV. It's really, you know, you might get away with it. It's like there are not many companies that are going to love you if you out them in the newspaper. But maybe you get away with it. I don't know. But the thing is, it's going to be very difficult to get that other job afterwards. Because they're Googling you, they'll figure out this is the person that runs the newspaper about stuff, and they're not going to hire you. So I would be very careful about a public whistleblowing. Or just like, oh, I'm not going to do this and quit. No, it's like if you're getting to the point where you're going to quit, be on LinkedIn, call all of your contacts, say, I'm looking for something different. It's like, I'm really happy, but I'm thinking maybe a little change would be good. Don't say anything, just go. And then people are like, well, why are you leaving? Are you unhappy? It's like, no. I just thought I would have a little change. And if it's really, really bad and you really can't stay because they're asking you to do something illegal and you know you have to quit, you're like, no, I decided to spend more time with my family. That's what all the politicians say. They're always going to spend some time with their families, right? So you are too small and it's too much risk, so don't take it on you. But don't do anything illegal, because a guy just went to jail, and he was just an engineer, went to jail over the Volkswagen diesel fumes thing. And it wasn't a manager who went to jail, it was an engineer that went to jail. Can you imagine being convicted because somebody told you to like fiddle with the test results of diesel fumes? So be careful. But don't do anything illegal, because you might end up in jail. And you have these unsung heroes that manage to change things inside of their companies but this is very office politics-y stuff, right? If you're managing to pull it off, or if you know somebody who's really good at office politics that can do it for you, then you kind of have to fiddle it a little bit. But you have like crazy last resort, like Edward Snowden, where you just go like, and then you hide in Russia. And most people can't do that. So there's a lot of different things. You have to ship it. You have to try to get control over it. You have to try to own it. You have to try to make it yours. You have to live it. You have to have a process on doing this as you go. And you have to try to protect it from the really dumb stuff. But if you're going to remember anything is on this slide, you need a security hotline. You need some way for people to contact you. You have to ship your fix. You have to figure out how you're going to ship for all of your things. How are you going to ship? And then you can't do it on your own. There are people all over your organization that are going to be instrumental to make you successful. And there's another discipline in that, and that comes now. And that's designing the user experience of security. And I'm going to give you a screenshot, and I hope people will recognize it. Maybe you've seen it in like the last couple of weeks. Does everybody know what this is? Yeah. For you who don't know what this is the unfortunate screen and you can ignore the red and the green stuff. That was me trying to be helpful so you would see it. But basically, this is the screen where somebody clicked wrong and caused all of Hawaii to think they were going to die. I don't think anybody in this room would design anything like this. But we can't fault this guy. I'm serious. You can't fault this guy for clicking the wrong thing. And like somebody joked on Twitter, it's like, how many of you use Slack? Yeah, or have used. If you do like @everyone or @channel, you get this little thing going, are you sure you want to do this? Because you're going to hit this many people in this many time zones. And somebody joked like, yeah, when @everyone has a better security user interface than this missile warning system. And this is the problem, and there are many, many reasons why this is wrong. And first of all, the users won't read. People generally will try, like engineers will go like, yeah, we'll write lots of warnings, we'll put like a warning triangle, and we'll do all these things to make the user not do this, right? But the user is not interested in all of your text, they're not going to read it. All they want is to make it go away, because they have a thing that they want to do, and it's on the other side of all of your stuff. So they're going to try to make this thing, whatever you put on, go away. If they can make it go in any way they can, they will make it go away. And they will not read anything to get there. So you have to try to make less is more. Don't have so much text. Don't actually ask the user. Just don't. Just go like, this is the right thing to do. Don't ask your user, do you want to send this encrypted or not encrypted? And your user will go like, what is encrypted? I don't know. Maybe it's magic. Probably best to do without magic. No, don't ask the user. Just say send, right? There's no reason why the user should know how this thing is sent. And make sure that the defaults are the good ones. That if you just click next, you'll end up in the right place, the good place, the safe place. When you know that the user will only try to get rid of this dialogue you put there, then make sure that their default behavior is going to be the thing that puts them in the right place. But if you really, really, really have to, and I'm saying most of the time you don't, but if you really, really have to, then explain it with language that the user understands. And this is something that we're really bad at. We've gotten much better at graphical design, except this Hawaiian system. We got much better at user experience, except this Hawaiian system. But we're still really, really, really bad at language in this business. And we don't even realize very often that we're bad with language. We use words that have a certain meaning in our profession, and we give them to a user that is not in that profession, and they have a totally different meaning to that word. And I have a non-tech example of this. I have a daughter, and she's 17. I had her when I was 21, so I was young. It was great having a teenager. But she's like in all sorts of fandoms, and she has like these people that she wants to hook up in like this whatever fandom universe that is in. And she'd go like, I ship this person and this person. That's something that she says, right? And then when I talk, I say that I ship a product. So this is like a joke we have where we like play with her meaning in my context, and she plays with my meaning in her context, which makes no sense at all. But the thing is, when we bring in her grandma, ship means totally, it's either a boat or you send something by mail. But it has nothing to do with the product or people hooking up. And the thing is that very often we do this, and you'll see this most explicitly in translations. That you will have some external company translate your strings for your UI, and they will come back. And the thing is, if you don't have a native speaker, you'll go like, yeah, this is probably good. I don't understand it. I will fit it on my button. It's good. Unfortunately, Dutch, I have to have a bigger button. But it's true. But the thing is, if you don't have a native speaker that understands the application, they can't even tell you that is wrong. And you can, like what I saw in opera and in Vivaldi, we had volunteers that did translations. And in one way you could say like, oh, that's very unprofessional. But the people who did it, they were enthusiastic about the product. They used the product. It's like they knew everything. When they made like, and they were, the reason why they did the translation was because they wanted their countrymen to use this fabulous thing that they had, you know? And so all of the strings, they were localized to local meanings, to local expressions. And then when I was at Cisco, they decided it was going to professionalize all of this. So they put it out to an external company. They sent all the strings. They sent a little explanation of the context of all the strings. And then the translations came back, and they were so bad. They were horrible. They were like, and you realize that this word means 3 different things, and they translated to the totally wrong thing. We had one thing which was a concept of the active speaker. It was in teleconferences, right? So you had a person that was the talker. It was translated to being the active speaker, but in this case, speaker being a speaker, like up there, like a speaker in a microphone kind of speaker, which isn't even a person. It doesn't make any sense, and we saw things like that over and over again. So if you're going to use language, be very explicit, but also you have my last example in this case is something Windows did in the 90s. They would have a dialogue if they had a crash. You could get a dialogue up and it said like an illegal action was performed. And the user goes like, I'm sorry. Are you going to call the police? I don't know. If I click OK, will it be OK? Like, I don't know what happened. I did something. Apparently, I did something wrong. I don't know what I did. And we do this, OK? So just be careful. And your users are going to be trusting. And don't blame them for that. They have other concerns in their life. They're going to be trusting, and we have to try to do as much as we can to put them in a good place. So they're going to trust you with all sorts of things. They're going to trust you with their baby pictures. Now you're going to say, you can put them in your cloud. I feel they're safer there than in my house, right? And what happens when the backups fail of somebody's baby pictures, right? You can't do that again. So you have to be trustworthy. You have to realize that people trust you, and you have to feel that responsibility of being able to live up to that trust. So remember, everybody is an expert. Everybody in your company, they have different roles. They can work in PR or marketing, or they can work as a sysadmin, or they can be something, but they're experts in their area, and they will be instrumental to making security work in your company. So these were the challenges. Hopefully you have ideas for your own projects. And you have to realize that you can do all of these things, but you have to design for security. In your user interfaces, you have to design for it. You have to make sure that the user is set up for success, and don't end up with a bunch of links with lots of text, and they end up scaring the life out of all of Hawaii. And that's my talk, Make It Fixable. And I come from Vivaldi, I make a browser. I have some stuff that is here, and the t-shirts are only women's cut. Thank you, guys. So please take them so I don't have to take them home. So even if you're a guy, you can take one. You have a girlfriend, right? Thank you. Yes, exactly.